I, 18, female, thought my life was fairly normal, but the last few months have been the most chaotic of my life. Thanks to my golden child sister, Kim, 22, female, and her obsession with having the ideal destination wedding. Growing up, Kim was unquestionably the favorite. My parents, Patrick, 56, male, and Joanna, 55, female, treated her as if she could not do anything wrong. I was used to being last in line, but this wedding fiasco, it brought things to a whole new level. So Kim was getting married to her boyfriend, Sean, 22, male, who she had known for 2 months. And her dream was to have a huge, extravagant destination wedding at a luxury resort. It cost far more than anyone could reasonably afford, but that was not enough to discourage her. When she got her heart set on something, it became everyone else's problem. My parents immediately supported the idea, despite the fact that they lacked the necessary funds. At first, I assumed I would attend the wedding just like any other sister, but I quickly realized that my role was more like a walking bank account than anything else. When the costs started getting out of control, my parents sat me down and informed me that they needed to use my college savings to help fund Kim's big day. I was furious and basically offended. That money had been set aside for my future, for the education I had worked so hard for. And more importantly, it was the money our grandfather left for me. He left money for Kim as well, but she wasted all of that money just to maintain her lavish lifestyle. However, as usual, Kim's wishes came first. My parents did more than just ask. They guilted me. They made it sound like I was selfish for not wanting to help out the family by supporting Kim. They made statements like, "Kim would do the same for you," which was a complete joke. After days of exhaustion, I gave in. I reluctantly transferred $10,000 from my savings fund, frustrated and disappointed. The days leading up to the wedding were tense. I still was not happy about giving up my savings, but I tried to make the best of it. At least I would be able to attend the wedding, right? Wrong. 4 days before everyone was set to leave for the airport, Kim pulled me aside and dropped a bombshell. I was not invited to the wedding. She said having me there would be a bad look for the family. I did not even know what that meant. I just knew it hurt. After everything, I was not even allowed to be there. I watched in shock as my family packed their bags and left for the airport without me. They did not seem bothered by the fact that they had excluded me after taking my money. I spent those days alone, stewing in anger and betrayal, but that time also gave me clarity. I realized how much I had manipulated my whole life, always putting Kim first, always sacrificing for her. Not this time. I called my bank and requested a charge back on the $10,000 I had transferred. I did not care about the fallout. I was done letting them walk all over me. The chargeback was processed, and the money was returned to my account within a few days. It was a small victory, but it felt massive. I had finally gained control over something. I knew my parents and Kim would be furious when they found out, but I was prepared for any drama that came my way. Now, this is where things took an even stranger turn. With my family out of the country, the house was quiet, or at least it was until a few days later when an unexpected guest showed up at the door. It was Kim's husband's ex-girlfriend. I did not know her, but she introduced herself and said that she needed a place to stay and acted like she belonged there. I was so confused. I did not know what to do, but I did not have the energy to deal with any more drama, so I let her stay. I found out that she had a complicated relationship with Kim's husband and had been in contact with him before the wedding. Apparently, she had hoped to patch things up with him, but things did not go as planned. I didn't know the full story, but it was clear that her being here was a problem waiting to happen. When my family finally returned from the wedding, they were all exhausted and stressed. Kim was already in a bad mood because her perfect wedding had not gone as planned. There had been tension between her and her husband, and she was furious about something that happened with his side of the family. Little did she know the real drama was waiting for her at home. All hell broke loose the moment they entered our living room and saw Kim's husband's ex standing there. Kim totally lost it. She screamed, demanding to know why this woman was in our home and how she got there. My parents were also shocked, but their primary concern was to calm Kim down. The ex-girlfriend, for her part, did not appear alarmed. She acted like she belonged there, unconcerned about the chaos she was causing. It turned out that Kim's husband had invited his ex to the wedding at the last minute, which caused a huge blow-up during the event. I guess she did not take the hint when things didn't go her way at the wedding, and she decided to show up at our house instead. Kim was beside herself. She had spent tens of thousands of dollars on this wedding and sacrificed so much, only to have her husband's ex-girlfriend crash the whole thing. And then came the money issue. Kim had no idea that the $10,000 I had given her was no longer part of her wedding fund. When she checked her accounts and realized it was missing, she went into another fit of rage. My parents, predictably, were furious with me, but I did not care. I calmly explained that since I was not invited to the wedding, I did not feel obligated to pay for it. It was that simple. The house was a total disaster. Kim was furious about the wedding, her husband's ex, and the debt she now had to repay. The wedding cost $40,000, and she had no idea how she would pay for it. She blamed everyone, her husband, his family, and me, for how things turned out. Meanwhile, her husband appeared to be walking on eggshells, attempting to smooth things over, but failing miserably. In the midst of the chaos, I felt strangely unattached and unbothered. For the first time, I was not caught up in Kim's drama. I had taken back my money and was concentrating on my own future. College was once again on the horizon, and I was beginning to plan my future. I had spent my entire life sacrificing for Kim, and I was done with it. Kim continued to have temper tantrums about the wedding, her husband's ex-girlfriend, and her financial situation as time passed. But I had finally drawn a line. I was not going to back down, and I was not going to let myself be dragged into the chaos any longer. Kim's ideal world was collapsing around her, and for once, it was not my fault. The unexpected guest had turned her life upside down, and now she was the one left to deal with the consequences for once in her life. So here I am. Kim's wedding was a complete disaster, thanks in large part to her husband's ex-girlfriend, who crashed both the event and our house. She is stuck with $40,000 in debt, angry that I took back my $10,000, and my parents will not stop guilt-tripping me for not supporting the family. They all treat me as the villain for standing up for myself and refusing to pay for a wedding that I was not even invited to. But honestly, after everything they have put me through, I do not feel bad. I've started focusing on my future, college, my own life, and I have drawn a boundary that I'm not willing to cross anymore. Kim's tantrums and their expectations no longer feel like my responsibility. But my family keeps saying I am being selfish and petty for taking the money back. So AITA for pulling my $10,000 and letting my sister deal with the mess she created? Update 1. Hi, it has been around 4 months since I made the post, and I think this is a good time for an update because quite a few things have happened since I made the original post. After the wedding drama, settled down a little and my parents stopped trying to guilt trip me about the money, I noticed that Kim's situation got worse. It began with her complaints that Sean was not doing enough to help her. He worked a regular 9-to-5 job, but it was clear that the wedding and its related expenses were putting a strain on their finances. Instead of addressing their problems directly, Kim began to lash out, believing Sean should be her emotional support while he dealt with his own stress. That was only the tip of the iceberg. The financial situation grew out of control. Kim struggled to cover the wedding expenses after my chargeback. Her credit cards were maxed out, and she began getting calls from collection agencies. This put a lot of pressure on her, causing her to make questionable financial decisions in an attempt to fix her life. She began taking odd jobs, but instead of lowering her debt, she ended up getting into even more trouble. One night, she decided to throw a celebration dinner in order to show everyone that she was fine and had everything under control. However, when she began inviting friends over, the price of food and drinks increased significantly. She went all out, hoping to impress everyone and give the impression that she was still living her lavish lifestyle. It became a disaster. Kim ended up spending too much, running up a bill at a local catering service that she could not afford. When the bill arrived, she had to contact my parents for help, which only added fuel to the fire. My father, for the first time in his life, was furious at Kim, wondering how she could be so irresponsible after receiving so much financial support. To make matters worse, Kim's friendships began to fall. Sarah, one of her closest friends, finally confronted her about the situation. Instead of taking the criticism to heart, Kim became furious, accusing Sarah of being not supportive and jealous. Their fight resulted in a heated story battle on social media, with Kim publicly criticizing Sarah for abandoning her during the difficult times. It was embarrassing to watch, and the drama only made matters worse for Kim. Then came the next wave. She decided that what she really needed was to become an influencer, and she used her recent wedding as a platform to launch her online persona. She began posting about her life, her adventures, and her wellness journey, which primarily consisted of her purchasing expensive products and experimenting with ridiculous diets. She expected this to magically solve all of her problems, but it was clear that her followers saw through the act. The comments shifted from supportive to critical, highlighting her hypocrisy and extravagant spending while drowning in debt. Instead of taking constructive feedback, Kim went on the offensive, blocking anyone who dared to question her lifestyle. In the midst of all of this, Kim began to participate in a local community group focused on wedding planning and budgeting. You would think this would be a good decision for her, but it quickly turned into another source of headache. During one meeting, Kim took over the discussion, bragging about her perfect wedding while completely ignoring the group's focus on practical budget advice. The other members became frustrated and a fight broke out. Kim stormed out, saying they were just jealous of her wedding experience. The group eventually blacklisted her, dealing another blow to her already fragile social standing. During this time, I began college and was able to get some scholarships and take out a few loans. I was relieved to be out of that toxic environment. I tried to avoid the drama as much as possible, but Kim's outbursts were never far from my mind. Every time I spoke with my parents, they would give me an update on how and what Kim was doing, which was never good news. My mother even suggested that now that I was back on track with school, I could help out. But I quickly dismissed that idea. I was not going to let myself get sucked back into their mess. Kim was finally dealing with the reality of her increasing debts. The community group that had once seemed like a lifeline had turned against her, and her social media following had shrunk to near zero. Friends who had previously supported her were backing away, realizing that the person they knew disappeared and was replaced by someone consumed by denial and fake lavishness. Meanwhile, Sean moved out and started living with a few of his friends because he could not deal with this drama anymore. Staying with Kim only meant spending way too much money for no apparent reason, and he was clear that he would not be able to afford that or her lifestyle in general, and it was fair, to be honest. My parents, still trying to help her, encouraged her to get a job or reduce her spending, but Kim would not hear it. She was confident that her influencer dreams would come true, and she refused to settle for anything less than the life she desired. I watched her spiral deeper into her delusions. She was determined to prove everyone wrong, but she only alienated herself further. Eventually, it became clear that Kim needed to hit rock bottom before she could start to change. I mean, I thought she already did several times, but okay, she probably has a different definition of rock bottom than I do. Anyway, it was sad to watch her. Her wedding had become a mixture of everything she thought she wanted, and now it felt like the start of an entirely different kind of failure. The girl who had once been the star of the show was now struggling to find her place in the world. So that's where things stand right now. Kim is back at home with my parents. Her finances are in shambles. Her husband is done with her. Her friends left, and her dreams of becoming an influencer are not exactly going as planned. My parents are worn out trying to support her while managing their own stress, and I'm just trying to stay focused on my own life, hoping to escape the chaos for good. Update 2. Hello everyone. It has been around 3 months since the last update, and I wanted to give you an update on Kim and the things that are happening in our lives. So, as you may remember, after the disastrous wedding and her attempts to get her life back on track, Kim lost Sean for good. He moved out a few months ago, and it feels like we are still in the middle of a TV show. At first, Kim was in complete denial about their breakup. She pretended that everything was fine and honeymoony while sharing old photos from their wedding on social media. It was embarrassing, to be honest, and a little sad. She was left to face the fact that her fairy tale was over after Sean left. She showered Sean with messages begging him to come back. I mean, she would make desperate promises like, "I'll do anything to make this work." It was difficult to see her put herself down like this, and I could not help but think that she needed to focus on herself. Instead, she was focusing on convincing Sean that they could magically fix everything. Kim showed up unannounced at Sean's apartment during one of her lowest points, sobbing and begging him not to leave her. He handled it gently while remaining firm, explaining that their relationship had become toxic and that he could not go back. That only made her more desperate, and she was sure that if she simply showed him how much she loved him, he would reconsider. I remember one night when she called me and sobbed about how she would die of loneliness without him. It was painful to hear, and I was torn between wanting to help her and realizing she was slipping deeper into denial. I tried to remind her to prioritize her well-being, but she was not ready to hear it. Things changed when Sean began dating someone new. When Kim found out, it was like a light switch went off. She quickly went from sad to angry, posting passive-aggressive rants on social media, accusing him of moving on too quickly and how she was sure he cheated on her. Watching her lash out made it very clear that she could not accept the fact that she had pushed him away. Kim then made a complete mess of things by organizing a party, inviting mutual friends in the hopes of getting back with him and fixing their relationship. But guess what? Sean did not show up. Instead of at least trying to act stable, she had a public meltdown. She kept asking her friends about why he did not show up at the party. The whole thing was embarrassing, and it made her seem extremely desperate. The final blow came when Sean made it clear he wanted to finalize the divorce. I cannot even describe how hard it was to watch her break down when reality hit her. She felt like she had lost everything, and honestly, she had. Kim's emotional state got worse after this. She shut everybody out, including our parents, who were just trying to help. They tried to convince her to seek professional help, but instead of appreciating their support, she lashed out, claiming they didn't understand her pain. It was exhausting to try to reason with her, especially when I was trying to focus on my own life. They eventually convinced her to see a therapist, but it felt like a half-hearted effort. Kim attended a few sessions, but quickly rejected the idea of getting help. She clung to the hope that her marriage could be saved, refusing to face the reality of the situation. Kim was in denial, which became clear over time. She began posting pictures of them together, reminiscing about their happier times, as if this would somehow bring him back. It was sad to see her clinging to a love that was not even there anymore. With the divorce approaching, we do not know what Kim might do. She's stuck in the past, holding on to her relationship with Sean, even though it is non-existent now. I wish she could see that the only way forward is to confront her emotions and start the moving process. But she is stuck in the past. It's tough for everyone, especially for Sean. He's trying to move on while Kim is still pulling him back into her drama. I really hope she finds a way to face the truth and start rebuilding her life. But at this point, it feels like she does not want to change things for herself. So that is where things stand. Kim is drowning in desperation and denial, holding on to a relationship that has ended. I can only hope she eventually accepts reality and begins to get better. Until then, we are left to deal with the consequences of her actions and the effect that they have on those around her. Update 3. Hey everyone, it's been a few months since my last update, and things with Kim have somehow gotten even worse. If you remember, Kim had been spiraling ever since Sean left, and their marriage basically ended. Well, it didn't stop there. Now it's personal. Kim asked me for money a while ago. She said that she had some emergency bills and was struggling a lot. She's my sister, so I decided to help her out in spite of my doubts. I gave her a substantial amount of money, hoping it would help her get back on her feet, but I should have known better. Kim blew through the money almost immediately. Instead of paying bills or doing anything reasonable with it, I do not even know what she spent it on, but it definitely was not what she said it would be. When I confronted her about it, she freaked out. She called me selfish and said I did not realize how difficult things were for her. It turned into a huge fight. And then she cut me off. She blocked me on social media and did not answer any of my messages. I was angry and upset, but mostly I realized I had had enough of her drama. I tried to help, but she threw it back at me, so I made up my mind I was not going to be dragged into her mess anymore. A couple of weeks went by, and suddenly Kim showed up again. She was out of money and out of options. She apologized and said she'd been in a dark place and just needed time. Then she asked if she could stay with me for a while because she had nowhere else to go. I said no. I told her I could not keep helping her unless she was willing to help herself. I explained that her constant drama and irresponsible choices had to stop, and I was not going to let her take advantage of me any longer. She cried and tried to make me feel guilty, but I stuck to my decision. I refused to let her drag me down with her. She went back to our parents, who were finally tired of her drama. Our parents, who have been trying to support her through all of her ups and downs, decided it was time to give Kim an ultimatum. They told her that she needed to either get a job or get out of the house. I believe they were hoping that this would wake her up to the reality of the situation. I do not blame them. Living with Kim had become exhausting for all of us. Surprisingly, Kim did find a job pretty quickly. It's not something very big or glamorous. It's just some retail gig at a local store. But at least it's something. You would think this would make her happy, right? Well, no, not quite. She has been complaining non-stop since she started. Nothing is good enough for her. The hours, the pay, her co-workers, absolutely nothing. I understand that starting a job can be difficult, but her constant whining is exhausting. Every time I talk to her, she complains about how unfair it is and she's too good for this type of work. It is as if she does not realize how fortunate she is to have a job at all after everything that has happened. The worst part is that she often tries to drag me into her complaints. Can you believe how stupid my boss is? Or, I shouldn't have to deal with this. It's hard for me to be sympathetic when I know how much she's taken for granted in the past. I want to encourage her to focus on the positives and actually make the most of this opportunity, but she just will not listen. And of course, she still feels entitled. She tends to compare her new job to her old life, acting like she's living some sort of nightmare because she's not at the center of attention anymore. It is honestly exhausting to hear her talk about how she misses her luxury lifestyle, especially knowing that she brought all this on herself. My parents are doing their best to be supportive, but I can see the toll it's taking on them. They tried to remind her that this job is a stepping stone, but she just rolls her eyes and brushes it off. It's like she thinks she deserves better without putting in the effort. I guess some things never change. So now Kim is stuck in this cycle of complaining while trying to adjust to reality. I just wish she would realize how fortunate she is to have a roof over her head and a job, even if it's not ideal. For now, I'm staying out of it as much as I can. So now Kim has found a job, but she's making it pretty clear that she is not made for this life. I'll keep you all posted if anything changes, but for now, it looks like we are all stuck in this. Update 4. Hey everyone, it's been a while since I last updated you about my sister Kim, and things have taken some unexpected turns. Every time I talked to her since she got her job, it felt like I was entering a pity party. She would rant about how unfair her boss was, how her co-workers were lazy, and how she was too good for this kind of work. I tried to support her and remind her that everyone has to start somewhere, but it was exhausting to hear her constantly focus on the negatives. I was starting to feel drained. Our parents, who were doing their best to help, began to get tired of her complaints too. They reminded Kim that this job was just a starting point. But she rolled her eyes and said that they didn't understand how hard her life had become. It was really frustrating to see her waste a chance that so many people would love to have. After a particularly rough week, I reached my breaking point. I told her she needed to stop focusing on the negatives and start appreciating what she has, and that she is lucky to have a job after everything that has happened. That didn't go well. She got really upset and called me unsympathetic, so I decided to take a step back and let her figure things out on her own. I did not hear from her for several weeks. Honestly, I was relieved. I felt as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. However, I could not help but worry about her. She was still living at home, and I knew our parents were starting to get overwhelmed. I hoped she would eventually realize that unless she tried to change her life, it would just stay the same. Then, one day, I got a text from Kim asking if we could talk. I prepared myself for another round of complaints or excuses, but when I called her, I was shocked. She sounded so different. She sounded happy and excited, and she told me things were starting to look up for her. I was surprised, but also happy for her. It was actually very clear from the way she was speaking that things were actually going pretty well for her. She did not mention Sean even once. She never complained about work. She could only talk about how work was so amazing and how her manager was so impressed by her. I was so happy for her. One day, she called me to say her manager had complimented her on her customer service skills. I could hear the excitement in her voice as she shared how she had helped a customer find exactly what they needed. It was a small victory, but it felt huge compared to how she had been just a short time ago. Kim started to take more responsibility at work. She began volunteering for extra shifts and became friends with her coworkers. Our parents also noticed the change. They were also optimistic, and it was sweet to see them encouraging Kim as she started getting better. They encouraged her to save money for her own home, and Kim surprisingly listened. She mentioned wanting to regain her independence, which seemed like an important step forward. Then came the day she told me that she had saved enough money to move out. I was excited. She thanked me for being patient with her, which felt good given everything we had been through. Now, Kim is gradually moving into her new apartment and she is continuing to work hard. It's amazing to see her take charge of her life and realize that change starts from within. Of course, she, like everyone else, has moments of doubt and frustration, but she can now handle herself. She called me the other day, not to complain, but to tell me about how excited she is about a new project at work. I could not believe how far she had come. Kim was a completely different person just a year ago. She was so focused on living this lavish life, spending our parents' money, but she is finally taking charge of her own life, and I would be lying if I said I'm not proud of her. She's my older sister, so I had always wanted to look up to her as a child, and maybe now I finally can. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.